Welcome to Subaru Ecu Flash Training Part 9. In this video, we're going to be taking a look at working with closed and open loop operation within our Subaru ECUs. Now, our closed and open loop operation is going to be referring to our fuel delivery and our primary oxygen sensor that's fitted into the exhaust stream. When we're in closed loop, we're going to be taking a look at that primary oxygen sensor signal to determine what the air-fuel mixture is going to be. When we're in open loop, we're going to ignore that primary oxygen sensor. So the ECU is going to have these two primary modes that it's going to be operating in, and we're going to be using both to calibrate either the mass airflow sensor or the speed density operation mode. There's going to be a lot of specific things that we cover in this training tutorial, so you're very familiar with what operation mode you're in and then how to work with that and utilize that for tuning purposes when you're going in and working with your calibration file. There's going to be a lot to cover. Let's jump in so we can check this out. Okay, so let's get started. We're going to be taking a look at working with our closed and open loop operation within our Subaru ECUs in terms of our fueling delivery. Now, we need to understand the differences between closed and open loop, so when we're doing our calibration process, we know what data to look at in our data logs and how to use that data in order to update things like our mass airflow sensor curve, our injector data information, or our speed density table if we're dealing with a Carberry-based ROM. So we have a lot of little details and things to talk about here. Let's talk about closed loop in general, what it actually represents, because a lot of people don't understand the differences between closed and open loop. When we're talking about closed loop operation, closed loop means that the Subaru ECU is going to be taking a look at our primary or the front oxygen sensor mixture. We can determine what the mixture is going to be between the air and fuel as it's being burnt in our engine, and we are going to be able to measure how much oxygen content is in the exhaust stream. We'll find if the mixture is very rich, we'll have less oxygen. If the mixture is very lean, we'll have more oxygen. The sensor can pick this up. And it's going to be taking a look at what we want to run our target air fuel at idle part throttle. It's going to be stoichiometric or 14.7. We can see how far the sensor registration reading is off for the oxygen content. And depending on what our mixture is going to be, the ECU can make adjustments to whatever the injector pulse width is going to be. So we know we have our underlying equation, fuel mass is equal to air mass divided by target air fuel. We would know the air mass from our MAF sensor or speed density. That can figure out what that air mass is. Our target air fuel is going to specify what we want the target air fuel to be at. Knowing air mass, knowing target air fuel, we can calculate fuel mass. We turn the fuel mass into an injector pulse width based on all the injector data information. Once we deliver the fuel to the engine, the sensor, the primary oxygen sensor, measures how much oxygen content's in the exhaust stream, and then it can report that back to the ECU. Once we know that information, it compares it to the target, and then it can adjust the injector pulse width to deliver more or less pulse width to hit the target air fuel that we'd like to be at. So that's going to be closed loop. It utilizes essentially a short-term fuel trim and a long-term fuel trim together to be able to achieve what we need for an injector pulse width to hit our target. Now, that's going to be ideal at idle and part throttle, but once we start to get up into higher load and higher throttle angles, getting into boost, we no longer can run at 14.7 to 1. We need to richen up our mixture, and we'll find as a result, we no longer can utilize the front oxygen sensor's reading, and we go out of closed loop, so the ECU isn't going to be able to make adjustments based on our sensor differences, the target air fuel compared to what it's measuring from the actual sensor itself. It's not going to look at that. It's not going to look at that relationship. It's going to ignore it. And it's going to run in what's called open loop, where it ignores the front O2 sensor. And it will deliver whatever the fuel mixture is going to be based on just measuring what the air mass or estimating what the air mass is going to be and knowing what the target air fuel is. It'll figure out what the fuel mass should be and then turn that into injector pulse width. And we'll find that theoretically, we should be at the target air fuel that we're requesting. We'll find we always have some slight deviations and differences, and we might need to calibrate that at full throttle conditions. But in open loop, we no longer look at or utilize anything to do with the front or primary oxygen sensor. So that's the difference between closed and open loop. So closed loop is used for idle part throttle cruise conditions. Once we get into full throttle, we'll transition from closed loop into open loop, and in that situation, we don't look at the oxygen sensor. Very basic, very simple, but we need to understand these key differences. So now that we've talked about that, let's talk about how this is going to work within the Subaru ECU. We'll find that other ECUs, taking a look at something like a Honda, we'll find an older Honda specifically, we'll find that those have a narrow band sensor. They're accurate between 0 to 1 volt of operation scale range. A half volt from the oxygen sensor output indicates to the ECU that we're at stoichiometric mixture, 14.7 to 1. If we're higher or lower in voltage, the ECU knows that we're either richer or leaner than target. It can make adjustments in that closed loop
and then it can go in and adjust the pulse width to reach the target that we want to be after. That's 14.7 to 1 at idle and part throttle. But the problem is going to be here, not the problem. The Subaru ECU isn't going to be functioning like most other ECUs with a primary sensor. It actually has a somewhat of a wideband sensor. So if you're familiar with looking at a wideband gauge, wideband can read between 10 to 20 to 1 typically accurate, and we'll find that we can measure what the actual mixture is going to be. In a Subaru, the primary oxygen sensor, it will read accurate to around 12 to 1 air fuel, and after that we definitely want to utilize and take a look at an actual wideband measurement for open loop conditions. However, we will find that we can rely on the sensor's output in a Subaru to give us the mixture if it's slightly richer or slightly leaner than whatever we're going to target at, and typically it's going to be stoichiometric, and we can utilize that for the closed loop control. Now, what we need to understand here with the Subaru...
Thanks for checking out our teaser clip. If you want to see the rest of this video and more than 500 hours of current EFI training we have to offer, make sure you click right here. If you want to go and check out more teaser clips from this training course, click here, and you don't want to miss any of the videos we're going to be releasing on this channel, so make sure you subscribe and click here. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys later.